On November 2, 1932, the Commonwealth of Australia issued a declaration of war. It wasn't against Britain, New Zealand, or any other nation. No, this was a war against nature itself. The enemy, over 20,000 strong mobs of emus, massive flightless birds related to ostriches and ospreys. These mobs were gobbling up grain crops in Western Australia's agricultural region. Farmers were losing hundreds of pounds worth of wheat each day, so the government decided to deploy a small task force to deal with the situation. They would stop at nothing to protect their citizens and their prize-winning wheat. They just needed to find 20,000 bullets. Now, we should clarify that the Great Emu War wasn't the first recorded instance of humans fighting birds. There was that time Roman Emperor Nero supposedly unleashed poisonous cranes on Saint Basilissa, his wife, who survived by sheltering under a basket of fish. Or that incident in 1888, when a flock of starling in Cincinnati caused such a commotion that police had to break their skulls for the safety of passers-by. And sure, there have been conflicts throughout history between bears and humans, ants and humans, even bees and humans. But those are nothing compared to the Great Emu War. This conflict pitted man against beast in a way that was unprecedented in its scope and ambition. The story started in 1931. The year before, Western Australia experienced its wettest winter on record. The rain created ideal conditions for the growth of poisonous seeds, which were then eaten by countless small animals. The explosion in the rodent population resulted in more predators moving in, including birds of prey. The emus were attracted by the prospect of easy meals, but soon found themselves fighting over scarce resources. As the drought dragged on, the emus were forced to abandon their usual diet of vegetation and berries and search for protein elsewhere. They began attacking farmlands, devouring vast quantities of wheat, peas, oats, and barley. By late 1932, a military operation seemed imminent. Major Meredith, a veteran of the Gallipoli campaign, was put in charge of eliminating the threat. His orders: kill every emu in the area. The trouble was he only had 2 Lewis gunners and a handful of soldiers. At first, the men set up positions along fences and fired into the oncoming masses. The emus, however, proved extremely difficult to kill. According to legend, it took 12 bullets to bring one bird down. Even then, many simply ran off, wounded, but still alive. By the end of the day, the men had killed perhaps 500 emus while wasting thousands of bullets. This wouldn't do. The military needed a better plan. Enter Captain McDowell, who came up with the idea of encircling the emu camps with barbed wire. If he could funnel the emus into tight groups, the soldiers would stand a much better chance. On November 6th, the soldiers moved out into the scrubland to install the wire. They worked quickly, stringing up long coils until the emus were trapped inside a large pen. Then the men retreated to nearby trees and waited for nightfall. When the emus emerged from their camps, they found themselves in a deadly trap. The military opened fire, and hundreds of emus dropped. Finally, it seemed like the battle was going Australia's way. But the victory was short-lived. Turns out that emus can't actually be killed unless they get hit in the neck or chest. Every other wound simply heals within a few days. And these birds are stubborn as hell. Here's what happened next, taken from the report of Captain McDowell. When the emus were released from the trap, they made a dash for the cover of the surrounding scrub. Some did so quite successfully. Others, in their efforts to escape, fell victims to the Lewis gunners. We counted 17 dead outside the wire, and it was evident that the birds had sustained very light wounds, merely scratches. This was because the bullets were hitting them in the legs and wings instead of the vital organs. So after suffering minimal casualties, the emus regrouped. It was now clear that the military was dealing with a highly intelligent animal capable of learning from its mistakes. The emus seemed to know where the bullets were coming from and would deliberately avoid those spots. They even seemed to anticipate where the soldiers would set up new positions. Once the military attempted to ambush them, but the emus simply walked around the entire perimeter until they found another entrance to the camp. From that point on, the soldiers didn't stand a chance. Throughout the following weeks, they tried everything they could think of to stop the birds. One farmer wrote, "I saw an emu standing on a log having a go at a dead mate which had been killed by a bullet. The living bird was prodding the dead one with its beak and trying to drag it down off the log." Another wrote, "They travel along roads and tracks, leaving no grain in the paddocks through which they go. They eat everything in sight, not even leaving the chaff behind. They pick up stones and clods of dirt and throw them at you. An old hen with a brood of chicks came back 3 times to try and mob me, throwing stones all the time." So after suffering tremendous losses, the government sent in reinforcements. Soon, thousands of soldiers were combing the countryside for emus. These men used armored vehicles, airplanes, and Lewis guns. They also employed snipers armed with bolt-action rifles, hoping to land lucky shots. Yet somehow the emus always seemed to be one step ahead. It got so bad that some of the soldiers started making bets on how close the birds would come before they ran away. Here's a quote from one soldier that captures the situation perfectly. "We could not catch them, and if we got too close, they would charge us. Also, they charged our motor lorries and jeeps. They would also mob our Lewis guns, and when the hot bullets were spitting out, they would stand around and scream at us." But things took a turn for the worse when a military truck broke down near a large group of emus. According to one soldier, "We were surrounded and mobbed by about 2,000 birds, which commenced to peck and hammer the canvas till it was ripped to shreds. They hammered away at the petrol tins, smashing them open and lapping up the petrol. I could not believe my eyes at seeing them drinking the stuff. The maddest thing of all was that they made a rush for the truck and tore up the floorboards. It was obvious that the emus had developed a taste for human food." After several hours of driving around in circles, the men finally managed to reach friendly lines. They had barely escaped with their lives. Meanwhile, word spread of the disastrous military operation. Newspapers across the country published mocking pieces about the conflict, and public support for the war effort began to dwindle. Ultimately, the Army's objectives were twofold: stop the emu threat and restore public confidence in the military. By December, they'd accomplished neither. General Hutton visited the site and concluded there was little hope of success. He ordered the soldiers to abandon their posts and return to their regular duties. In the end, the emus won. Over the course of 2 months, the military had killed around 10,000 birds, a fraction of the original population. To make matters worse, the soldiers wasted over 4,000 rounds of ammunition. That's the equivalent of roughly 200 modern-day M4 rifles. Now, no one is exactly sure why the military lost so badly. Perhaps emus are naturally more intelligent than other birds. Or maybe they were simply lucky. Historian Peter Find argues that the emus were likely smarter than your average animal. He writes, "It seems probable that in intelligence and adaptability, the emu ranks very high among animals. Its behavior during the war showed a high degree of intelligence, including the ability to reason, to remember, to act according to plan, and to take military precautions. It could learn and pass on lessons. Like any military force, it adapted its tactics according to its enemy's moves. It was certainly a worthy and most unexpected opponent." Whatever the case may be, the Great Emu War was a disaster for the Australian military and a triumph for the birds. As one newspaper put it, "The whole experience has been a humiliating one for the military authorities, who must now be prepared to face the ridicule of the whole world." And with that, the era of military intervention in environmental issues effectively ended. For the next half-century, the Australians favoured trapping and shooting emus over open warfare. But we want to know what you think. Should we fight more wars against animals? Let us know in the comments. Also, thanks for watching today's video.